In the winter of 1778, the air in New York City didn't just smell of smoke and sea salt, it smelled of defeat. The British Empire had turned Manhattan into their North American fortress. Their ships clogged the harbor, their soldiers filled the taverns, and the redcoats marched through the streets with the arrogance of inevitable victors. To the casual observer, the American Revolution was gasping its last breath. George Washington's Continental Army was ragged, starving, and blind. They were losing because they didn't know what the enemy was doing until the bayonets were already at their throats. Washington, a man of immense stoicism, realized a hard truth. He could not outfight the British Empire. He had to outsmart them. Intelligence is the soul of an army, Washington famously wrote, and to find that soul, he didn't turn to a seasoned general or a hardened mercenary. He turned to a young, golden-haired major named Benjamin Tallmadge, and together they built something the world had never seen before. They built a ghost network. This is the story of the Culper Spy Ring, the ordinary shopkeepers, farmers, and outcasts who lived double lives, risked the gallows, and ultimately delivered the United States of America its freedom. The architect and the farmer. Benjamin Tallmadge was young, handsome, and a Yale graduate. He was also the perfect spy. He understood that the old ways of spying, sending a random soldier across enemy lines, were suicide. Nathan Hale, a friend of Tallmadge's, had tried that just 2 years prior. Hale was caught almost immediately and hanged, his famous last words regarding his one life to lose serving as a grim warning. Tallmadge proposed a different method. Embed agents who didn't look like agents, people with reasons to be in enemy territory. He looked toward his hometown of Setauket, Long Island, a hotbed of British occupation. He recruited his childhood friend, Abraham Woodhull. Woodhull was not James Bond. He was a nervous, asthmatic farmer who sold cabbage and pork. He was paranoid and anxious, but he was also a man of quiet conviction who watched British soldiers raid his neighbors' farms and quarter in their homes. When Tallmadge asked him to spy, Woodhull didn't just say yes, he created a persona. He became Samuel Culper Sr. The plan was deceptively simple, but incredibly dangerous. Woodhull would travel from Setauket to New York City under the guise of visiting his sister and buying supplies. There, he would gather intelligence, memorize troop movements, and identify ships. But getting that information back to Washington, who was stationed across the Hudson River, required a logistical miracle. The chemistry of secrets. Washington was obsessed with secrecy. He knew that one intercepted letter could unravel the entire chain and send his friends to the gallows. To protect the ring, they utilized tradecraft that was centuries ahead of its time. First, there was the sympathetic stain. Sir James J., the brother of Patriot John J., had developed a chemical compound, a special invisible ink. Woodhull would write banal letters about family health or the price of grain, but between the lines, using the stain, he would write detailed reports on British fortifications. The ink was invisible to the naked eye and would only reveal itself when treated with a specific reagent that Washington and Tallmadge possessed. Then there was the code. Tallmadge created a numerical dictionary. It was a pocket-sized revolution. Instead of writing General Washington, they wrote 711. New York was 727. The British were 745. Spy was 713. It was a system so complex that even if a letter was captured and the ink revealed, the message would remain a riddle of numbers to the British intelligence. The heart of the beast. Woodhull, Culper Sr., was effective, but he was too nervous. The British checkpoints were tightening. The ring needed someone inside the city, someone who could walk among the British officers without raising an eyebrow. Enter Robert Townsend, alias Samuel Culper Jr. Townsend was a Quaker merchant and a society reporter for a Loyalist newspaper. He was quiet, reserved, and owned a coffee house frequented by British officers. He was the perfect listener. While British commanders drank ale and bragged about their plans, Townsend wiped down tables, his face blank, his mind recording every word. Townsend was the ghost in the machine. He never met Washington. He barely spoke to Woodhull. He insisted that his name never be spoken, even among the spies. He gathered the most critical intelligence of the war from the heart of the enemy's headquarters. The clothesline and the whaleboat. So, how did a whisper in a Manhattan coffeehouse reach George Washington's tent? The route was a relay race of death. Townsend wrote the intelligence in invisible ink in New York City. A courier, often a tailor named Hercules Mulligan or Simple Rider, smuggled the message to Woodhull in Setauket, Long Island. Woodhull needed to signal the next link in the chain, Caleb Brewster. Caleb Brewster was the muscle, a swaggering, fearless whaleboat captain who navigated the treacherous waters of the Long Island Sound, known as the Devil's Belt. The British Navy patrolled these waters constantly, but Brewster treated them like a nuisance. But how did Brewster know when Woodhull had a message? This brings us to the legend of Anna Strong. A neighbor of Woodhull, Anna's husband was a prisoner of war. Her farm was on a bluff overlooking the bay. According to local lore, she used her laundry to signal the spies. A black petticoat on the clothesline meant the courier is here. The number of white handkerchiefs hung next to it indicated which hidden cove Caleb Brewster was waiting in. It was domestic camouflage. A British dragoon riding past would see a woman doing chores. Caleb Brewster, looking through a spyglass from his boat, saw the coordinates for a rendezvous. Brewster would row the message across the Sound to Connecticut, where Tallmadge's dragoons were waiting. Tallmadge would ride like the wind to Washington. The turning of the tide. For years, this ring operated in the shadows. They provided Washington with the British order of battle. They warned of surprise attacks. They exposed counterfeit money operations designed to bankrupt the Continental Congress. But their greatest triumph came in 1780. The French had finally joined the war. A French fleet carrying thousands of soldiers was en route to Rhode Island to support Washington. It was the lifeline the Americans desperately needed. But Townsend discovered a terrifying secret. The British knew. The British fleet was quietly massing in New York Harbor, preparing to sail out and intercept the French before they could even land. It would have been a massacre. The French alliance would have ended, and with it, the American Revolution. The message flew through the network. Townsend to Woodhull, Woodhull to Brewster, Brewster to Tallmadge, Tallmadge to Washington. Washington received the news just in time. But he didn't have the ships to fight the British Navy, so he used the intelligence to play a bluff. He drew up plans for a massive and fake attack on New York City. He made sure these secret plans fell into British hands. The British general, Sir Henry Clinton, panicked. He recalled his fleet from the ocean to defend New York against the attack that never came. The French fleet landed safely in Rhode Island. The Culper Ring hadn't fired a shot, but they had just saved the war. The betrayal and the victory. The ring was also instrumental in the darkest moment of the war, the treason of Benjamin Arnold. When Major John Andre, the head of British intelligence, was captured in Tarrytown with plans to the fortress of West Point in his boot, it was Benjamin Tallmadge who first put the pieces together. While others were confused, Tallmadge, trained to suspect everyone, realized that the high-ranking American general Benjamin Arnold was the traitor. Because of the intelligence network's vigilance, the plot was foiled. West Point was saved. Arnold escaped, but his handler, Major Andre, was hanged. The war dragged on till Yorktown in 1781, where the combined American and French forces, safe because of the ring's earlier work, forced the British surrender. When the British finally evacuated New York in 1783, George Washington rode triumphantly into the city. But that night, he didn't dine with generals or politicians. He went to a small tavern. There he met with Benjamin Tallmadge and a few quiet civilians. He raised a glass to the men and women whose names he could not speak aloud. The most remarkable part of the Culper Ring is not what they did, but how they kept their secret. Robert Townsend, the Quaker who spied from the coffee shop, was so committed to his cover that he never revealed his identity in his lifetime. It wasn't until the 20th century, 1939 to be exact, that a historian examining old handwriting matched the script of Samuel Culper Jr. to the ledger books of Robert Townsend. They were the original silent professionals. They were farmers, housewives, and shopkeepers who understood that freedom isn't free. It is purchased with courage, wit, and the willingness to walk into the dark so that others may see the dawn. If you learned something new today, hit like and subscribe for more true stories from the front lines. You're watching History WWUS. See you next time.